I think the Swedish people have decided that they want to make the switch. They want to travel in an eco-friendly way.
Or the whole energy production has to go up so much, and especially the electricity production now that we have this green change in the world of power production.
I think we need a system where we actually price carbon correctly, and it needs to be not only local but global.
Energy discussion in Sweden at the moment is not so good. It's back in the 1970s, all about supply.
Hi and welcome back to The Switch, not another podcast, the podcast where we educate you and entertain you in everything that has to do with the green transition. We've had the honor of having guests such as Microsoft, Cake, Chevron, Dnb, and we are proud to also now be at Almedalen. So what is Almedalen, you might think? Well, I'll tell you that. It's a democratical platform of Sweden where all the people with power are connected and collected during 1 week in the summer. Well, we were there, The Switch and the team, to interview different people from different perspectives about what they are doing for The Switch, how they are contributing, and what they think they want more, different, or better in order to make the green transition move faster. We've had some really inspiring conversations with many people, distinguished guests. We have not less than 11 people contributing to this show, and we are so happy to be able to share it with you. What we hope to do with this episode is to give you insights in what the elite of Sweden think about how we can reach the green transition. How can we make the switch? Well, tune in and enjoy, and see you soon again. I'm sitting here with Claes Lindholtz, Senior Vice President Communications and Sustainability at SJ, that's the Swedish Railways. Welcome to The Switch.
Thank you very much.
You have been around here at Almedalen a couple of days. How has it been?
I think it's been a tremendous experience. I think it's all about the meetings, about the people you meet and the conversations you have with those people. Making those connections and building those bonds that you can work with as you go back to like everyday normal life.
I mean, there's, as you said, a lot of reflections that came up now. What do you think that you will bring with you to your daily work? What would you like to do more, less, or differently after being here a couple of days?
I think a lesson learned is the spontaneous meetings with individuals, people you haven't thought you'd meet, but you met them and you had wonderful conversation and you learned from them, and you found different areas for collaboration going forward. And I think in your day-to-day business we tend to talk and communicate with the same bunch of people all the time. I think you need to be more curious of meeting new people from maybe areas that you wouldn't normally talk to people from, and have that innovative process of that conversation. That's been a big realization during these days, that I've talked to people that I never would have talked to otherwise, and it's been wonderful conversations.
How will this affect the Swedish Railway, or SJ as we call it here?
It's hard to tell. I think in different perspectives. In the short run, maybe not so much, but growing these relations and finding common ground for development will take some time. I had some really nice conversations with STF, the Swedish Tourist Membership Association, thank you very much, about how can we together enhance the travel to different parts of Sweden that is lovely to travel to, and doing that in a manner that doesn't hurt the environment. And I think from those conversations we identify that we can do more together.
Super interesting, because I think that everybody understands and knows that if you go by train, that is a better option for the environment. But if you look at it from a perspective of doing a green transition, what would SJ like to do more or less or differently moving ahead?
I think it's a couple of things. I think the biggest challenge for us as an industry is the lack of infrastructure. I think the Swedish people have decided that they want to make the switch. They want to travel in an eco-friendly way, and train travel is the best way to travel. I don't see that the politicians have made the same commitment. I think we need to be even more aggressive when it comes to rebuilding the railroad tracks, the infrastructure, as well as producing new tracks, because as of today the tracks are full. We can't produce any more trains, and the people want to travel more by train. So I think that's the biggest, most important question for us as an industry, to persuade the politicians to give directions to Trafikverket, who's the infrastructure manager, to put even more effort into rebuilding the Swedish railway network.
It's super interesting because what you're saying is that the citizen, the Swedish citizen, is ready, but the politicians and the market is not ready.
I don't know about the market, but I think that the politicians need to be more clear on what they want to do and be aligned with the transition that needs to be made. And I think today they make a lot of good decisions when it comes to rebuilding the infrastructure, but I think as well they made some decisions I have a hard time understanding. And for example, me personally, I find it kind of provocative that we've now Trafikverket has decided to have a tender offer on flying between Arlanda and Mora. So we're going to use public funds to make sure that you can fly between Arlanda and Mora, which is a short haul where there are plenty of trains, and it's the emissions for those airplanes is going to be huge. So I find that hard. They say they want to go green, but yet again they procure air travel on short distances.
Well, now we have something to fight for.
I totally agree.
What I wanted to say is, are you satisfied with what SJ is doing in order to make the switch?
I would say yes. I think we do a lot of good things. We are in the midst of, I would say, the biggest financial commitment ever in the history of SJ. We are buying new trains for 19 billion kroner, which is the biggest investment ever in SJ's history. And these trains are coming for the next couple of 5 to 6 years, as well as we are now launching the biggest campaign to hire new employees. We are going to grow with 1,000 people within SJ, which is like 20% organic growth, which I think is amazing. So I think we do a lot of strategically good things about investing into to further enhance the railway network of Sweden. Having said that, again, the infrastructure needs to be built along that. But I also think we can do more. I think we have one issue that is connectivity. I think the consumer of today want to be connected all the time, and I think we have a lot of work to do together with mobile network operators, the MNOs, to actually build more coverage where the railroad goes. Historically, the MNOs have always built cell towers along the ordinary roads where cars go, and they need to put cell towers where the train goes as well, because today it's really hard to be connected on the train, and we are doing what we can. We're changing the windows to radio transparent windows so more cellular data can come into the train, but we need cell towers. So there I think we have a huge challenge ahead of us to together with the MNOs make sure that they invest in that.
Well, I think that you just took away my only argument why I should not actually travel only with train. So thank you for that.
I think a lot of people think it's up to SJ. Oh, why it's so hard to be connected on the train? We don't like it either. But it is the lack of cell towers along the railroads, and that needs to be built.
This is super interesting because what you're actually saying here is that there is a need of a societal collaboration. So we're talking about the tech companies, we're talking about the phone operators, and also the politicians.
Yeah, and if we stay on connectivity for a bit, I think it's really here and now, because PTS in Sweden, which is Post- and Telestyrelsen, which is the governmental agency that out the 5G frequencies that's going to be auctioned. Within the next 100 days, they're going to decide if it's going to be mandatory to build cell towers for 5G along the railroad or not. And if you look at Germany, in Germany they decided you can't get a 5G license if you don't build connectivity along the railroad, because they want to further that development, because they want to make sure people transform to green ways of travel. And Sweden we haven't done that yet. So we are currently telling everyone we can, please make sure that the PTS takes that in as a demand on the MNO that will get the frequency for the 5G network, that they have to build connectivity along the railroad. If they do that, we'll make sure the trains will work perfectly with that.
Well, I'm happy to hear that there is so much going on. And with that said, my final question was basically, are you doing enough to make the switch happen? And you answered me yes to that. Is there anything you would like to plead in order for SG to make a faster transition from other organizations, people, politicians?
That's a hard question. I think if we're going to be successful with the switch, we need to cooperate. We need to cooperate within the industry, and we need to cooperate with other industries. So it's all about collaboration, I would say. It's us and the other train operators, it's Trafikverket, and we all want the same thing. We want really tremendous customer experience for our customers on the train, and that needs to happen from the door where they leave and modes of transport they're going to use to the train station during the actual train ride, as well from the train station you arrive to the actual site you're about to visit. So I think that collaboration needs to happen. I think we can yet again do more, but if we all decide that this is important, I think we have the foundation of everything we need to make sure we meet the goals.
Well, I like to end things on a positive note, so thank you very much, Claes, for that explanation, and I look forward to see this future SJ of Sweden to continue, and I will start taking the train back up to Åre, to the northern part of Sweden.
That's a lovely ride to take. It's beautiful to go by train to Åre, and I wish everybody would take the train to Åre and stop flying, because we need to remember you can take the train for a completely work lifetime for the same emission as one flight.
Famous last quote. Thank you very much, Claes. I have the pleasure of sitting here with two gentlemen, Thomas Kåberger and Amory Lovins. Thank you for being with us here at The Switch, Not Another Podcast. For the people who are listening now, can you do a short introduction of yourselves so people understand who we are talking to, because this is celebrity in our business.
I'm Amory Lovins, and I've spent the last 50 years creating a lot of the foundational concepts and practice for energy efficiency, renewable energy, and the transition to a clean, secure, prosperous energy future.
For people, I know you, but for people who don't know you, what are you most famous for?
Well, I redefined the energy problem in '76 as being not about just where to get more energy of any sort, but how to get the right amount and quality and scale and sources of energy to do each job in the cheapest way. And then I figured out a lot about how to transition the electricity system to renewables and keep it reliable and resilient as it becomes renewable, how to save most of the energy we now use, and how to get gracefully out of the fossil fuel business, since most of the fuels will have to stay in the ground. They're not worth extracting, and they would ruin the climate if we did burn them.
Well, that is mind-boggling, to say the least. With you, we have Thomas Corbarier. Please tell our audience more about you.
I'm not so impressive. I'm a university professor at Chalmers University of Technology. The title for the professorship is Industrial Energy Policy at the moment. I have a background as a thermodynamicist and physicist. I've had some other tasks in life. I've been director of the National Energy Agency in Sweden, and I'm now on the board of Vattenfall and some other companies, and working in Japan with renewable electricity.
There are such big CVs that I get falling off the chair over here. But I do tend to ask questions that are pretty simple, and I would like to ask the both of you those simple questions that might have very difficult answers. We'll see. But my first question for you both is, what would you like to see be done more, less, or differently in order for the world to be able to make the switch into green transition?
I like to twist the question a little bit and say, today, in July 2022, we are in a situation that's quite remarkable, because the Putin war in the Ukraine and the tension that has created has resulted in fossil fuels globally becoming much more expensive than they were half a year ago. And from a climate policy and energy transition point of view, this is just about the effects that we will get from a global carbon tax. So this price increase of fossil fuels has created enormous opportunities for profitable energy efficiency and for profitable transition to more renewable electricity. So this is not just what I want to see for my own sake or for the sake of the world, but it's also pointing to something that is now possible with sometimes enormous economic profits.
Thank you, Amory. Would you like to add to that?
And at the same time, we have this extraordinary new price signal, which will last for quite a while. We have advances in design and technology that make the energy efficiency potential or resource several times bigger than we thought, and yet cheaper, and often with increasing returns. So the more efficiency you buy, the cheaper it gets, so you buy more, so it gets cheaper, just like renewables. That is the dynamic that has driven renewables to provide about 95% of the world's net additions of generating capacity in the past few years, and accelerating further. But I don't think most people realize this efficiency revolution has happened at the same time. So even though a country like Sweden has become exceptionally efficient already, the potential for further savings is even bigger than it was in the 80s, because we've found new opportunities faster than we've used up the old ones. And this means that at least half, probably at least 2/3 of the energy in Sweden can be profitably saved by wringing more work out of it technically, perhaps 3/4 or more. We don't know yet, because we haven't really reassessed it in light of these new techniques, but clearly the potential is enormous, and that means that we can do a bigger job, meet a bigger share of the needs with renewables at lower cost and much sooner. So this is all very good news for getting to a secure, just, prosperous, and climate-safe world.
I think one of the important things you said there that is a common failure in design processes and economic analysis is that you point to the fact that if you spend even more resources on energy efficiency, you can sometimes get over thresholds where you avoid other large investments. So you can have a situation where the limit to the marginal improvement comes rather soon, but if you consider the opportunity of going even further in energy efficiency, you can avoid spending money on other pieces of equipment, and thereby making the whole project much more profitable.
A simple example would be my own house from 1983. I live 2,200 meters above sea level in the Colorado Rocky Mountains, where the temperatures used to dip to minus 44 Celsius, and you could get 39 days of continuous cloud in midwinter. And yet in the middle of our house, where we just harvested banana crop number 80 with no heating system in a tropical jungle we built, and it is cheaper to build that way because we save more construction costs leaving out the whole heating system than we paid for the efficiencies that eliminated the heating system. This sort of example plays out in all sectors, not only in buildings, but for example in the carbon fiber electric car I drive from BMW. They made money on every one of the 250,000 of that model that they sold. even though carbon fiber is much more expensive. It's a very light, strong, safe material, but it was thought to be too expensive for ordinary cars. Well, it turns out it's so much simpler to make that way, and you need so many fewer batteries to move less weight, that the car comes out at a competitive price and with some wonderful attributes. Similarly, in industry, you can often save so much money in supply that the investment to save energy is more than paid for up front, let alone save future operating costs.
You are sitting with so much knowledge about how to improve and to make the green transition in this. I'm just thinking about the common person out there. I'm thinking about the people who are investing in different things. Whose responsibility is it to get all this knowledge that you have and to start making the switch on an individual base, on a company base, as an investor? Who bears the responsibility to do that?
I think it's difficult to describe it as a responsibility. I'd rather see it as an opportunity. And as we said in the beginning, with the current situation with high energy prices, these opportunities are so rewarding that I would hope that a lot of people get interested, see the opportunities and utilize them, because it will be beneficial to themselves, but it will also be very beneficial to the world at large, both from a sort of short-term conflict reduction perspective, but also in the longer term from a climate change perspective. So it's not an obligation, not a duty, it's an opportunity.
Great.
I teach integrative design for radical energy efficiency at Stanford, and the conditions are so ripe to spread this practice quickly across Sweden with the excellent engineers and entrepreneurs here that Thomas and I are actually discussing how we can bring such pedagogy to Sweden, meld it with the deep experience of the Swedish engineers, and come up with something even better for everybody.
Does this mean that we have something that we can export as well from Sweden?
Well, I think there are opportunities for clever people to utilize these opportunities and earn money nationally as well as internationally. And if we are fast and bright and effective in realizing these opportunities here, of course we can earn money both nationally and internationally. But there is one issue, and that is that the most important developments for energy efficiency is about design processes, and it is not the individual product that is the most important thing, even though cars may be an example where you have actually a design process resulting in a project. But if you look at houses, it's more complicated.
Let me give a simple example from industry or buildings. Half the world's electricity runs motors, half of the motor power runs pumps and fans. And if we take the pipes and ducts coming out of the pumps and fans and make them fat, short, and straight rather than thin, long, and crooked, we can save 80 to 90+% of the friction, and therefore the pump or fan energy and power and investment. The saving, by the way, is 97% in my own house. Well, if everybody did this in the world, it would save about 1/5 of global electricity, or half the coal-fired electricity. You would recover the investment in less than a year fixing old installations, or instantly in new ones. And yet this is not yet in any standard engineering textbook, government study, industry forecast, or climate model. Why not? Because it's not a technology, it's a design method. And not many people yet think of design as a way to scale big change quickly. And yet this is actually not new knowledge. This is something Jan Eriksson figured out in 1870.
Right, an early attempt at Swedish export of engineering skills. Jan Eriksson, who came from Sweden and became famous in the US, producing the first operable ship propeller. He also wrote a book where he focused on solar energy on the one hand and on efficient design on the other. And this thing with big pipes and small pumps was one of the ideas that he communicated in 1870. So it's a bit disappointed that it's not used more.
On the other hand, we can look at the modern economy, say, of Denmark, which has built world-class export industries based on efficiency, wind power, biomass, biogas, other such areas of innovation. Sweden has many elements of a similar success prospect and can scale them if we really pay attention and apply our skills properly.
If you would grade Sweden versus the world, like if we would say like 1 is really bad at this and 10 is really good at this, where would the world be and where would Sweden grade in that?
Sweden is well above average and one of the most efficient, certainly one of the most skilled countries if it properly applies its skills. The energy discussion in Sweden at the moment is not so good. It's back in the 1970s, all about supply and hardly a word about efficiency, in which Sweden was the world leader in the 70s and 80s. But I think we could regain that stature fairly quickly. This is a very capable country with, I think, just the right size, enough people to have all the capabilities you need and not so many that you can't get things done.
Well, that was a good reality check, definitely. What about the world? If you would like give the world a grade today, both of you, on a scale from 1 to 10, where 1 is really bad and 10 is great when it comes to energy efficiency in that sense, what would you give the world?
I think it's very difficult to grade the world as it is because circumstances have changed. But I think the most important thing is that all over the world, the potential, the opportunity is now bigger than it has been for many years. And there's a combination of new technologies that have become available and fossil fuels that have become more expensive than they were a year ago. So all over the world there are enormous potentials, and those who bother to accumulate or gather all the knowledge on design principles and technological opportunities have a fantastic opportunity to earn money and contribute to saving the world or reducing the threats to the world.
On that topic, I would like to ask a question. I asked your colleague here, Mattias, yesterday. If you would choose one person that you would like to talk to that could make the biggest difference to the conversation to make the green transition come true, who would you pick and what would you talk to that person about?
I don't think that is an easy question to answer, because you cannot predict who will be the person who will decide by herself or himself that they will seize this opportunity and start acting to realize these opportunities. So I think that at least I tend to treat any student or anyone who wants to listen as someone who potentially can start acting and getting things done.
I would agree. There have been wonderful, wise and effective people in the past from whom we have a great deal to learn, even running back thousands of years. I think I can probably learn more from a young child who has original mind, beginner's mind, and is free of assumptions and preconceptions and therefore able to see more easily the simple solutions, not from adding things, but from getting rid of them, designing them out, and achieving, as Saint-Exupéry said, that perfect simplicity in which it isn't that there's nothing left to add, but there's nothing left to take away.
I love those answers that you just gave me. It gives hope, and it gives us also more dreams about all the opportunities that are out there. I'm back with a dear old friend, Frida Berry Eklund, spokesperson at Våra Barns Klimat, or Our Kids Climate as the translation sounds. You've been with us in the podcast before and I met you up here at Almedalen. What's the purpose of coming to Almedalen?
So the purpose this time is to launch a new analysis that we've done of the political parties and their climate goals. So what we've done is we've, together with scientists at Uppsala University, we've calculated a carbon budget for Sweden, a fair climate budget, taking into account that Sweden is a very rich country. And then we've compared all the political parties, all 8 of them, to that carbon budget. So we've developed or analysed what does these targets actually mean in terms of carbon tons, and then we've compared that to a carbon budget for Sweden.
And this is quite interesting, as we in Sweden actually have an election by fall. So what do you hope that this will actually mean for me as a voter?
Well, the one thing that we are trying to do with this project is, one, we need to change the debate to make sure that we're discussing the right things. I think many people might agree that whatever solutions are bounded around a lot of the time are not really connected to science at all. And it's really difficult as a citizen to know what's what. Is a plastic bag tax better than nuclear solutions? You compare apples and pears and also different time aspects. So what we're trying to do with Klimatkollen in general is actually just highlight and make available transparent data, statistics and analysis that can help voters ask the right questions from their local politicians, from the regional politicians and from the national politicians. So the whole aim is trying to make sure that politics are science-based. What do we need to do according to science, and then what solutions are going to take us there?
So in my words then, my button here is like, this is the end of corporate bullshit for politicians. Is that right?
I hope so. I mean, it's interesting because I think it's really clear, like a lot of the, the progressive companies, they work with science-based targets. That name itself says that it's aiming to be as close to what science says is needed as possible. Politics, on the other hand, are not science-based. So how can we make sure that it is? And I think a lot of the confusion has got to do with, we don't really know. We know about the Paris Agreement, but what does it actually mean in practice? What does it mean for a country like Sweden, a rich country? What does it actually mean in terms of ton? How many tons have we got left? The IPCC, the UN panel on climate change, is really clear that we do have a finite budget before we blow the 1.5 degree target, a really crucial target for humanity. So bringing it back to science, okay, what does it mean in actual tons? Then we know. It's like walking into a shop. If you don't know how much you have in your wallet and you're going to go shopping, but you don't have any price tags on anything, how are you going to make decisions? We need a carbon budget so we know how much we have as a maximum limit. Obviously, we're already, should be at zero really quickly, but we need to know how much we have and then what solutions are going to bring us to that target as soon as possible.
I look forward to this very much because, it's difficult to make the right decision as it is today as a voter. It's difficult to know and to actually call the corporate bullshit or to understand it because there are so many layers of this discussion. Do you think that the politicians will be happy about this? Can they see this as an actual something good, or do you think that they will be scared of this?
I think they're scared of it at the national level because it just shows how far from the target we are. The transition is so big, it needs to happen so quickly that that's a daunting task. If you're a politician, you are going to have to make decisions that are really brave, really quickly, that are really big, that mean lots of changes for us as individuals in societies if we're going to really succeed. So they are scared of that because if you don't have the public with you, you are going to get voted out. So I think this is the crux of the matter. We need to show what it actually means, but we also need to build support in the public to make sure that we can do this. We've seen that with the pandemic. We can make decisions that infringe on our personal space. We can accept changes if it's for a greater good. And we know that it's a level playing field, that everyone is doing the same. We know what's expected of us. And I think now it's very much left to you as an individual, as a consumer, as a citizen to make decisions that you think are okay. Whereas we know that we need more structure and more direction. So we know how can we contribute in the best way we can.
Well, we will certainly be more able to do that with the work you're doing. Thank you very much, Frida, for all the hard work that you're doing. You're actually making a big difference in this society. Thank you. So I'm standing here together with Mats Nilsson, electricity market analyst, and you've been having a debate just now. Came there from there. How did it go?
I think it worked out fairly well. There were a couple of different views, but I think we learned something today, and that we need to have the dialogue. And there were different interests in there: wind power, base load, and solar. But I think we got a very interesting discussion going.
I think so too. I actually wanted to ask you a little bit. One thought that came to me when I was listening to you today was: is there enough collaboration between the different technologies today? What's your thought on that?
I think there is, but there is also this willingness to want the politicians to support only your technology. So the wind power people, they want the politicians to support wind power and solar power and so on. And there I am a bit skeptic. I think we tend to be focused on just one technology when we actually need all of them. If we're going to have an evolutionary and fairly good path to the green society, I think we need to think more about having all these different technologies, not coordinated per se. They don't have to sit down at the table and talk about it, but we need to build the infrastructure around that concept, that idea.
I agree with you. On that topic, what would you like to see done more or less or differently to be able to make the switch?
I think the state needs to take a step back, not saying we need this much of solar, but rather build, for example, in the solar case, we need an infrastructure, we need support services. In the wind power case, we need a more efficient approval from the authorities, environmental approvals and so on. So we need different things, but we need to take a step back and not saying, well, we need this much wind power in the system, because we don't know that. And as soon as the state has done that, decided that we want this much wind power, for example, taking one technology, many countries have ended up in a rather messy situation with too much of one technology, and that doesn't support the power system as such. So less government decisions on how much of each technology, and more of the idea, well, what are the hindrances for these to develop, and then let it be evolutionary.
I think that you answered my question in a very good way. If it comes to, we've been talking about it from a politician view and a bigger view. What do you think that the individual should be doing in order to make the switch come true?
I think we're putting too much on the global citizens. If we can use taxes as an instrument, so if you're using a fossil fuel car, for example, that should be taxed heavily. I don't think actually the Swedish prices are too low, not from an environmental perspective, but that's a dangerous thing to say today. But if we can support the consumer with prices, then they should just act according to what they can afford and so on. And electricity, to electrify, we need actually to try to lower prices of electricity, so we get people to switch from other sources to electricity. So I'm not all. We had in the debate, there was the discussion that we need to decrease the electricity use with households, and I disagree on that, because electricity as such is a very clean source of energy, and so if we can produce clean electricity, that's fine. We want people to use that as well. So I think we're putting too much on the consumers, on the energy side, actually. Then we need to consume less and maybe do a couple of trips less and so on, but that's very specific, I think.
Interesting. What is your contribution to making the switch?
So I'd say my contribution is what I'm doing today. I try to find facts. I try to investigate what does it mean if the state does this or we use this technology. What kind of environmental impacts do the technology have? So I think in my work, I do things to make the switch. As a consumer, I try to recycle, use less materials and so on. But I'm not the perfect citizen, not by far.
Who is? Who is? Listen, thank you very much for helping us out today. One last question that came to my mind. We are in Gotland, Almedalen. This is where politicians meet the people and the journalists and so on. Do you think that the world in itself could be inspired by these kind of events? Do you think that this kind of conversations leads the green transition forward?
I do think the conversation and dialogue and an honest attempt of learning. So this could be an example, I think.
Thank you very much, Mats, and have a good day. I'm standing here with Daniel Badman, CEO of Wind Energy Association here in Sweden, and you just came out from a debate here at Dmbs. What are your feelings now afterwards?
Well, it was a great seminar. I think we had good discussions. We changed views on how to really make this switch happen. So yeah, it was good. It was good.
Good. We are asking the same questions to all of you, and the first question I would like to ask you've been listening to your colleagues. What would you like to see done more differently or better in the future?
I think Sweden needs to focus on, first of all, electrification for the sake of competitiveness and climate change, and mitigating climate change. And doing so, I think we need a strong political consensus, basically, that this is the way forward. When we have that, I think there will be a lot stronger actions than we have already today, from not least the wind energy side. We need more permits, we need a stronger acceptance of this change generally. I would say that those two are perhaps the key issues that we need to change in Sweden right now, and the wind energy is really ready to contribute.
Do you think that, you're talking from the perspective of wind here now, these changes that you want to have done, are those to be made for all of the different technologies, or how are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think they are. Making permits easier, having this really strong focus on the climate shift with electrification in focus, that will benefit all solutions that are in the renewable area, the renewable energy field, basically. So yes, I would say so.
What would you say that your industry is doing to make the contribution to the switch right now?
Right now, the wind energy is growing fast in Sweden. We're growing by 7 to 9 terawatt hours a year, and then we should know that we have around 160 terawatt hours in the Swedish electricity system. So we have a strong growth right now. So we are really contributing by doing that, we are really contributing to new industrial investments. Because we see that industries in other sectors that do want to shift away from fossil-based resources, they need renewable energy, and we are growing right now. But we want to continue to grow over time as well.
What do you think that? If you look at it from that perspective, what you just said here now, what needs to be done in order for you to make that transition that you need to?
So as we talked about before, I think we need to have a strong political agreement, a broad political agreement that this is the way forward. That needs to lead down to taking away unnecessary hinders, unnecessary obstacles in permitting processes and so forth. I think that's where we really need to focus, because the industry is there, the technology is there, the financial interest is there, but we are now meeting basically permit-related challenges, and I think that needs to change. If we are to keep growth at that pace that we need year from year to be able to double the Swedish electricity system in only 20 years, basically.
What can a normal citizen do to help do this transition even faster, from your perspective? We
need to, first of all, understand that building out electricity production will be will have a positive impact on your wallet, basically, because that will, at least in time, put pressure on the electricity bill to go down. So being active and supporting that development and electrification is really important. Then, of course, you can do a lot of things on your home basis. I mean, being smarter in how you use electricity and so forth. But I think this is the key, understanding, and we need to do that jointly, that we need so much more electricity in the Swedish system.
Thank you for explaining that for all the listeners to the Switch, and thank you for continuing doing a great job. I'm standing here with Paul Westesson, Head of Sustainability at Dmbs Sweden. I'm super curious. You've had a couple of intense days now, but what I want to know is a little bit more about DMB and the thoughts you have on the switch. So if I start there, are you guys, DMB, doing enough to make the switch happen?
I think we're at least trying to. We're in a startup of actually transforming on how we work. We've set quite ambitious goals when it comes to financing transformation, and we are focusing on the sectors where we can see transformation, like renewable energy, for instance. Yes.
Can you give us an example of one of the focuses that you have?
We are focusing on a lot on wind power. So we do have a lot of wind power projects, but we're also focusing on solar.
And you're doing the switch.
And we are doing the switch, yes.
Good. What do you say? I mean, you've been listening in now on all these conversations been had on the sustainability and so on. What do you think needs to be done more or less or differently in order to really be doing the green transition and making the switch come true?
First and foremost, I think we need a system where we actually price carbon correctly, and it needs to be not only local but global. I think that's the most important part. The other part is to have incentives to do the switch, and I think the government could be more ambitious in those areas. But we are going in the right direction. But it can't only be up to the individual and the companies to do the switch. It has to be done as a collaboration.
What kind of conversations do you think we need to have in order to make these collaborations come true?
I think we need to have a tighter collaboration between countries, for instance. I think the way that the Corona challenge was handled shows that there can be a global cooperation when it comes to making a change. I don't think that we are at the point yet where everyone has actually realized the need for change to the degree that it's actually needed. And therefore, this collaboration hasn't happened yet. But I'm quite positive to that we can have the collaboration if need be, but it needs to happen now. So the realization of the need for that collaboration needs to happen sooner rather than later.
I agree with you. It's really a global problem. It's not a local problem. What are you as an individual doing in order to make sure to contribute to the switch?
It depends if you're looking at the personal level or the professional one. But I think, I'm trying to influence through the businesses that we do as a bank. So trying to push our bank on how we work towards which clients and how we do business is probably the most effective way. And then on the personal level, it's switching to solar energy at home, driving electric cars, trying to consume more responsibly, maybe planning your travel a little bit more wisely than previously. So the small things.
The small things that make a big change. So thank you very much, Paul, for answering our questions here at the Switch, and thank you for the collaboration of the Switch Not Another podcast. I'm standing here with Anna Werner, CEO of the Swedish Solar Energy Association. How are you today?
Hi, I'm fine. Great to be here.
You've just been very fierce in that debate we've listened to here about the green transition. How were your thoughts after coming out of the debate?
I think it was a very nice debate, and I think I got my points put forward. I'm sorry if you if you got the impression I'm a fierce person, but maybe I'm very fierce with my ideas. Yeah,
I think that was a compliment from my side. Definitely, you are a fierce woman, and I loved it to see you on stage up there. You're representing solar in a sense. I have a couple of questions. We're here at Almedalen trying to figure out what needs to be done in order to make the green transition. So, from your perspective, what needs to be done more or less or differently to be able to do the green transition in Sweden but also globally?
In Sweden, I think the politics is the problem. We have a lot of rules from the old energy landscape that do not apply very well when we have a new power source of power, solar power. For instance, you pay tax on your own energy production and consumption. I mean, if you have self-consumption, like energy that you produce in your solar cells and that you also use at home, then you pay tax on that consumption. It's very weird. It is as if you grew tomatoes in your backyard, and for every tomato you eat from your own tomato cultivation, you have to pay tax, and the tax is pretty high. It's an energy tax, 36 öre per kilowatt hour. So it's a lot of money, and it's just on the very large installations. But that makes large installations still very rare in Sweden because of this tax on self-consumption. So that's one example of a rule that comes from the old world, and it doesn't apply in the new world. Yeah.
I just remember you took an example in there where you said that in Denmark they have parks that can take up to 300, and in Sweden we only have, what was it?
20 megawatt is the large, or 18 actually in Sweden. So the solar parks on ground, they are very small in Sweden, and that's also because that's not really because of that kind of tax, and that's more a question of getting access to land, because a lot of the land in Sweden is pinpointed for food production, because we only have 45% of our food production in-house or in the country. And there are other interests also that collide with solar. Sometimes it's the military, etc. So there is very few parks built, even though there are many investors who do want to build solar parks in Sweden, but they don't get access to the land because the land should be used for food production according to the local authorities. And so we're working hard to make the government pinpoint not only food production and defense, but also solar power, like they've pinpointed wind power as a national interest. So we want them to also say that solar power is also important for the future. It is the fastest growing power source in the world. So I don't think it's naive to say that we will have very much more solar power in Sweden. We only have 1% today, which is ridiculously little, of course, if you compare to a country like Germany, where you have 10%, or worldwide it's about 5%. So we are very low on solar right now in Sweden.
What's the potential?
I say the potential is about 15% in Sweden. They have made some simulations on a Swedish grid in Herrljunga, a small grid in Sweden, to see how much solar intermittent solar power can we put into the grid before we have to make major reinvestments in the grid. And they found that you can put 22% solar, no problem. The grid will be able to handle it. So in some grids you can take more than 15%, and in some grids maybe less. So the vision for my association is 15%. But since the solar production or the whole energy production has to go up so much, and especially the electricity production, now that we have this green change in the world of power production, that means a huge increase in absolute terms. So we have only 1.1 terawatt hours of solar electricity today in Sweden, but with the scenario, high scenario of increase in electricity production, this means we believe in 30 times more. So we believe in 30 terawatt hours solar production in 2030.
Interesting. What conversations are needed to be had in order to make this come true?
Oh my God. We need a national strategy for how to increase solar. We need the government to say that, to just acknowledge that this is the future, this is the fastest growing power source in the world, and Sweden should be on the train. We were very in the front line on the research 20 years ago, solar research. We even had, a production of solar panels in Sweden and all that, and we were really in the front. We have lost a lot of that, and basically all the production of solar panels is in Asia today. I think that's very, very sad. We need to take production to Europe and to Sweden. Maybe we cannot produce the whole panel here, but we can at least produce some parts of what is needed in the smart home in the future. Like there's a lot of you need the battery, you need to regulate the battery and have a smart software for when to charge it and when to use the energy in the battery and all that, and the combination of the car and the home system and all that. So there's a lot of research that can be done, and a lot of possibilities for Swedish companies to be in the front line in this transition to the smart home, where you have your own electricity production, you have your electric vehicle, and you can operate everything from your device or your...
What about you, Anna? What are you doing to make sure the switch comes true, if you look at it from a personal perspective?
I cringe in front of my computer. Oh, you mean personally at home? Oh my God, I'm so bad. I try to take the bike to work sometimes, which is also good in many other ways. What more can I do? No, I think basically it's through my work that I, try to get people open their eyes for this new technology and its advantages, and help the barriers disappear. And I do it through my work. I think I work a lot, so that means basically all my time awake.
Well, you're doing a good work, so thank you very much. And thank you for being with us at The Switch, Not Another podcast. We hope to see you again.
Yes, thank you very much. Nice being here.
I'm sitting here together with Frida Boisen, journalist, moderator, and also author. You're here at Almedalen and have been moderating a lot of events for Meta, right?
Right, that's correct. A lot about the metaverse and going into work life in the metaverse, and super exciting questions for the future.
And we're asking questions about the future as well, of course, but we're more on the green base. So we want to know a little bit more about what you've seen throughout this week. And our first question is, are you, Frida, doing enough to make the switch happen?
No, is a simple question. We could all do more than we're doing. This week we have been talking a lot about how the metaverse will help us to make the switch happen. How can we build a sustainable world in the future through new techniques? And I think the metaverse, if we're talking metaverse, will help us with inclusion, help us with equality. Of course, I mean, just think of Almedalen, where we are here. But maybe, as the critique often goes, it's a limited edition, with elite people being here. Maybe in the future we could just beam ourselves here, sitting here as holograms, having the connection and the closeness to politicians and people with power to make the switch happen.
That's super interesting. Do you think that is it coming soon? When do you expect this change to happen?
Well, it is already happening, but I asked the same question to, for example, Meta's country manager here in Sweden, Sam Rihani, yesterday, and I think the first time I asked him, he said, well, maybe 10, 15 years. Second time I asked him in another panel, he said, well, 5 to 10 years. So it's hard to say really, but I would say, at least a couple of years. I mean, we're already here. I mean, we have the first versions of the metaverse. Actually, our children are already there. I have a 14-year-old named Arvid, and he is playing constantly. And the children are already there. They are in a virtual world, and they are connecting. They are playing. They are working, solving, and they are investing. Even the possibilities are immense.
You were mentioning that kids are the ones who are actually pushing us forward in a sense, which is quite inspiring. My last question is, what would you like to see done more, less, or differently to be able to do the green transition and make a quick fix to the switch?
Well, one part, of course, is raising questions, as you are doing in the switch. To talk about it is one way, of course, and then walking the talk is another step. We can all do something. How can we build sustainability into our business models? It shouldn't be optional. It should be the foundation of every company, I think. And when you realize how much you can contribute, it feels great in your heart. So I really encourage more people to ask themselves, what can I do? We can do so much when we really set our mind to it.
I am sitting here with Stephan Ray from Green Cargo, and you are Head of Press and Public Affairs. Welcome to The Switch.
Thank you.
How has your Almedalen week been?
It's been very interesting and intense, of course, but I've learned a lot of things, and I'm leaving this place with a lot of more knowledge than I had before I came here.
Interesting. What kind of knowledge do you bring with you?
Well, I've learned a lot about different kinds of businesses, of course. I was listening to a seminar from the Swedish mining industry about the developments they're doing there in order to make the transition happen to a more green transition. And actually I've learned a lot about how we can help them with our business in the transport sector.
On that note, how about Green Cargo? What would you like to be done more or less and differently to make sure that we do the switch?
Well, I would like to see more, or at least less conflicts of targets. We have a lot of ideas on the table, but we have to be in an agreement about what we want to achieve. And for example, if you want to achieve energy efficiency, that should also be visual in how we dimension our transport sector. I'm representing a very energy efficient mode of transport, of course, with electrified rail, and that shouldn't be in a conflict with other modes of transports as well. But we can see that today when when the government is investing in different types of infrastructure. So we need to think more holistic about that.
Interesting. What would you say that Green Cargo does as a contribution to making the switch right now?
Well, a lot of things. We are actually, as we speak, releasing the plans for a new network for intermodal transports in Sweden, where we can offer a much better intermodal shift, where you have containers or trailers coming in with the ships to a lot of our large harbors, and you can lift them onto the railway right away at the harbor, and we can transport them the long distance in Sweden, and then we use the trucks for the first and last miles in the other end of the transport chain.
Is that in any way disruptive, or is it the way you think that your industry is going ahead? Is that the natural step to move forward?
I think it is, and we actually have been talking about this for 20 or 30 years in Sweden, but nothing has really happened, much because there have been quite a heavy competition on the roadside with cheap road transports. You have lorry drivers from other parts of Europe with low wages, perhaps less modern trucks competing with Swedish drivers and the Swedish railway for the past 10 or 20 years. And that has been an obstacle for us to make this happen. But now the markets have shifted. We have high energy prices that, for example, diesel, and we have a lack of drivers all over Europe on the roadside, and the customers are turning to the railway because we can offer a high capacity and low energy consumable transport.
Interesting, because what you're saying here is that you are solving a job issue where there is a lack of people, and you are also making it more energy efficient. If I would ask you, I believe that there is still work to be done What kind of help or conversations do you think are needed to be had in order to make sure that it goes even faster for you? What kind of help would you need from politics, society, or others?
We obviously need more or better infrastructure, and I'm not just talking about railway, but we need better roads, of course. We need the possibility to electrify the roads as well, in terms of where you can charge your batteries in your vehicles. We need to work together with harbors, terminal owners, to make this fossil-free transition in the whole transport chain. So that's where we are working a lot together. But we also need the individual customer needs to reflect over when you, for example, order something over the internet or buy something, that you reflect how that product, how is it transported? Is it done sustainable or is it done unsustainable? And you have, as a customer, a real big influence, but because that's where it starts, in my view.
That's an excellent example of actually everything needs to collaborate with each other. It's the politics, is the individual and the people, and also the market, of course. So thank you very much for answering these questions and giving us more inspiration that there is a lot going on the cargo side. So thank you very much, Stephan. I'm sitting here with Henrik Fontin, Chief HR Officer and Head of Communication from Jern, Husen. Welcome to The Switch.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what Jern Husen is?
We're a real estate company. We have all the real estate near the Swedish railway system, basically. So train stations, train depots, and buildings like that.
Interesting. So basically everything surrounding the train station.
Basically everything is around the railway in the Swedish railway system.
So your work has a lot of effect. Can you tell me a little bit about, we're here at Almedalen, and we have been having politicians, and there has been public, and market is here. If we look at it from a perspective of making the switch to a greener society, what does Jern Husen do today in order to make that shift?
I think we're doing it already. We need to do it even more and going even further. I could put it very simply. If I can get you and your friends and your family to take the train next time you travel, because you find the train station clean and safe, you're more likely to do that travel change, basically, or that switch from another kind of transportation system. So then we're good. If you can get more people on the train and more. When you buy something, for instance, if you have the possibility to choose, would I like to have that thing you just bought right now, or it's perfectly right tomorrow? If you can choose tomorrow and take it by train, that's the switch you're talking about. And if we can support doing that, we are good to go. And I think we are a stronger contributor in what we do that already.
There must be a bunch of houses we're talking about. How are you working with energy efficiency when it comes to all these buildings?
We have beautiful train stations and beautiful buildings, and some of them are the latest design, and they are very, very modern. Some are old. The railway system is 150 plus years old. So some of the train stations are, as you can understand, not that energy efficient or not that climate smart as they could be. But every time we do a change and every time we need to redo anything, of course we try to find green energy, for instance, use other kind of sources to make heating in winter time more efficient and closing the doors.
Is there anything from stopping you to make even bigger contribution to the switch and making things go faster? Is there any policy or collaborations that you would wish for?
I think there's a lot of things that we don't even know that we could do. There are so many unknowns for us, and I think we need to have that kind of innovation and creativity that and also try to find different ways. Look at other industries, what they have done in order to develop their businesses, and we can do so as well. So that's one thing. Work with others and learn from others, basically. Also within the business, within the system, I think we can do so many things in order to co-op and co-create, basically.
Is there any conversations needed to be had that you would wish for in order for this to go faster?
I would like definitely to have more conversations with the politics. I mean, we're running for the September elections in Sweden for the next 4 years. I don't think a 4-year time slot is enough to make that change we need. We've been working with the railway since 150 years. It's taken a long time to build that system, and I think we don't have another 150 years, obviously, but there are things that we could do right now that could speed up that process and make some courageous decisions, basically.
What will Jern husen do like the coming year or two in order to make things go faster?
That's a great question. I think we could do a lot of things on the current estate that we have right now in the current buildings. I think there are so many things that we also could do in when we are developing new areas and trying to be not maybe in the bleeding edge, but learning from businesses that are in the bleeding edge and dare to take decisions that really develops what we do, making new train stations or new areas that are more carbon neutral, basically.
Thank you very much, Henrik, for coming to us at The Switch.
Thank you.
I'm sitting here with Mattias Goldmann, climate opinion maker and leader for the Swedish 2030 Secretary. I had the pleasure of listening to you yesterday at the Dmb, and you were one of the most impressive speakers I've ever had. And I was just, to rephrase it, it was like sitting there, getting a slap, but still smiling and enjoying the lesson. So you have a great experience getting there you are. Can you tell us a little bit more about us, Mattias?
So I'm so excited to be part of this, and I was actually excited to be part of that dinner that you referred to yesterday, because over the years when I work with climate and sustainability, which has sort of always been my focus, it started as an NGO thing, but recently it has led to dinners with investors, large energy companies, banks and so forth, and I think it's not so much me who've matured, it's much more the issue that has matured and the sector that has become, we've become in a sense relevant and profitable for many different sectors that just very few years ago were not very interested in what we had to come up with. And those slaps in the face, they're also a great way to wake up, right? Even myself, I slap myself in the face sometimes to just wake up more quickly. And that is what's happening now. We see that climate change is urgent to deal with, and we see that the switch from fossil to renewable is becoming something where you want to be sure that you're one of the, if not first movers, that's a bit too late for that, but at least one of the early adopters, because otherwise you're simply left behind.
You've been in the industry for so long, what is it, more than 30 years?
It makes me sound very old, but yes.
Yeah. What makes you think that it's for real this time?
3 reasons. I believe that the switch to sustainable, to the circular economy, to renewable, I believe that it's for real this time. Firstly, because there's such a strong business rationale behind it. The cheapest way to produce new electricity these days is with solar or wind or other renewables. It's a lot cheaper than the ones that we want to leave behind. Secondly, unfortunately, we wasted a lot of time in combating climate change. And that means that we all realize that it's no longer about the polar bears or future generations. It's about you and me and all those people listening. It's about here and now. And that means that we are ready to take action. And thirdly, often when I bring up those 2 points, trying to convince business leaders that they should do the switch to renewable and to sustainable for business reasons, they just stop me mid-sentence and say that we don't really care whether it makes business sense. It's something that we want to do. It's something that we want to have as part of our DNA. And that's sort of almost sometimes frustrating, because I've got all these great arguments and I don't even need them anymore.
Well, that's reassuring to know, definitely. What if you would anyway have to use these great arguments in order? I mean, we have listeners now from all over the world, and they are investors, they are developers, they are country owners. What would be the, let's say, 3 best advice for them in order to make a green transition?
So I believe that a lot of us look at the very large investors with some interest. And for instance, I've been following the yearly letters for some time from the CEO of BlackRock, Mr. Larry Fink. And it's been interesting to see how he has recently switched from investing in anything that's out there to a strict focus on renewable, circular, energy efficient. And I don't believe that he does that because he's a born-again believer in combating climate change. I believe he does that for strict business reasons. And the main driver here is that if the world is even just half serious about the Paris Agreement, and the EU and other regions of the world are just half serious about being climate neutral around 2050, which more than half of the world's countries now promises in the Paris Agreement, then it's a huge business risk to be sitting there with stranded assets in form of investments in what's linear, what's inefficient, and what's fossil. You want to get out of there as soon as possible, and if you're fairly quick in doing that, you can still reap the benefits of being early on in new sectors that are yet to boom but will soon be the new normal.
What would you like to see change or be done more, less, or differently in order for us to do this?
So one important thing is that a lot of the renewables that come in don't actually replace anything. They just add on. There's more energy when there's more solar and wind coming. We don't necessarily phase out the coal energy. That's the dirtiest culprit of climate change. So I would love for us to focus more on energy efficiency. I know there's good business to be done there, especially with the high energy prices that we see in almost all of the world now due to Putin's very aggressive war against Ukraine. And I believe that those high prices are going to stay there for some time because unfortunately I believe that this war is not going to be over anytime soon. And with high energy prices, there's also high profits to be reaped from moving into something that's much more energy efficient. So that would be sort of my number one key advice, to not just focus on the switch, but also on becoming much more efficient. That's also very often a no-regret policy solution. You don't usually regret becoming more efficient and wasting less. So start there, and that would also make it much easier to switch, because often I hear that there's not enough renewable fuels, there's not enough room for all those solar panels, or there's a local opposition to wind power, and that's also true for many other sources of renewable energy. But if we need less because we're more efficient, there's also going to be less of those conflicts, and it's going to be much faster to do the switch that we need.
I usually ask the questions, what do you personally do to make this contribution? And I know this 2030 secretary that you have, can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that contributes to making the switch?
So firstly, what I do from a personal level, it's embarrassing now because I, for personal reason, live in Bangkok, Thailand. We are now right now recording this in Sweden. I wanted to take the train, but Putin's war stopped that. So when you look at my personal climate footprint, it's going to be larger than many others because I travel back and forth from Bangkok, which also gives me an added incentive to really do as much as I can when it comes to changing policy and helping others to move quicker into renewable, sustainable, climate efficient. And the 2030 Secretariat, which I head, is a large part of that. We are now recording in Sweden, which is only 0.15% of the global climate emissions. And that would lead some people to believe that what we do doesn't matter much. But fortunately, most of the politicians here in Sweden are wiser than that. They realize that our only way of becoming relevant as a small country is by leading by example. when we become the sort of global help desk for climate-friendly solutions or the permanent exhibition for climate-friendly solutions, that's when we can become relevant. That's when Swedish business can thrive. That's when we can create more green jobs and we can have a better trade balance. And the 2030 Secretariat focuses on the toughest of the Swedish climate targets, which is that by 2030, the entire Swedish transport sector is going to reduce its climate impact by 70% compared to 2010. That's the toughest target in the world, and it's really tough because unlike many other targets around the world, this is not just about cars. It's about all kinds of transport. And it's not just about the new vehicles. It's also about all the vehicles that are already out there that also need to be converted into something smarter. So this toughest target in the world is backed by 7 out of the 8 parties in the parliament. It's also backed by very wide industry coalitions that are part of this 2030 Secretariat. And we like to see ourselves as a coalition of the willing and doing, or promise keepers if you want. We're excited about these 7 parties agreeing on this, but when we meet with them, they would be the first to admit that they don't know how to reach the target. And that's why we team up all the experts. In the house right now, we got the globally renowned energy efficiency expert Amory Lovins, who gives us excellent advice on energy efficiency. And we got the best experts when it comes to renewable energy as well, and when it comes to sustainable transport modes and so forth, so that Sweden can really become the shining example that the world needs.
Well, we look forward to that. On that note, what conversations are needed to be had in order for this to come true?
You know, I love you for asking that, because very often we focus just on the Excel files or the statistics or the economic incentives. But what we do as humans, and even when we're business leaders, we're still humans, and even when we're politicians, we're still humans, is very much influenced on what we hear and what we talk about. So I think there's a strong call for us to discuss this more. There's a strong call, certainly in Sweden, for us all as Swedes to embrace this target and this vision of Sweden being a leader in the change that we want to see. And I would love for us around the world to all see ourselves as leaders to be. If it's in your company, if it's even just your household or your university or your municipality or your country, when we aim to be leaders, we make sure that the pace is quickened. When there's a strong competition to be number one, much more things happen. And that's why I would be very happy to see many other countries saying, no, we're going to do that faster than Sweden, to see different municipalities and companies challenging each other for leadership. That's the kind of conversation I would love for us to have, because I often see there's now sort of a sense that in a small country or a small company or a small municipality or small household, you can't make any difference. That's not true. We see that leadership matters, and anyone can be a leader, and anyone should strive to be that.
My last questions that I have to ask. Yesterday on the dinner, you mentioned the value and the importance of the firecrackers in a company, what we call in Sweden eldsjäl in a sense. What would you like to say? Because, I mean, this podcast is also to all of those people out there who are fighting, who are the leaders. Might be heavy sometimes. It might be a day where you have to have a big conversation or a heavy conversation or be in argument. What would you like to say, like final words, to really make them and encourage them to continue their strive?
So these firecrackers, they are the most important people when it comes to combating climate change and when it comes to the climate leadership that we need. And I think when we look at the context that we're in, be it a company or a city or whatever, and we ask ourselves how come we're in the position that we are, we realize that that's due to personal decisions and strong personalities pushing for their agenda. And when the firecrackers out there push for combating climate change, they become so relevant, way outside of the usual boundaries of the company, municipality or city, because they show what can be done. They lead by example. They lead by having the best showing the best results and showing what can be done, but it's also something that the rest of us have to embrace. I think that we can all mention several people that have been the shining lights and the shining examples of what to do, and then maybe they burned out, or maybe they just moved, or maybe they were employed by some other company or no longer working with us. Or maybe sometimes also some of us are just not on this planet anymore, which means that we cannot rely on the individual enthusiasm for too long. We need to make sure that that spreads, and we need to make sure that, first of all, make sure that we work with those people and embrace them, even though we might not be fully comfortable with all their ideas. Embrace their quest for leadership and embrace how impatient they are in seeing change. Sometimes that's going to be very cumbersome, it's going to be annoying, but we know that all big changes start with annoying people who just won't accept business as usual anymore. So if you're one of those annoying people, be even more annoying, we got your back.
For your firecrackers out there, so continue. Thank you very much for sitting down with us today, Mattias. It was a pleasure, and I hope to see more of you. I hope you enjoyed this episode directly from Almedalen. If you did, make sure to share it to someone you like and wants to be a part of the green transition. Also, for your sake, to not miss a single beat from us, make sure to subscribe and share on social media. Help us make the green transition. Help us make the switch. Until we meet again, take care of yourself and, if you can, someone else. Toodaloo!